Hi, welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to go over powers of monomials. Okay, let's start with an example. So here we have x to the third raised to the power of 2. How should we go about solving this? Well, one way we can solve this is to simply list out the number of x's you have and then multiply them all together. So we're squaring x to the third power. So x to the third power means we have 3 x's that are multiplying each other. And we're squaring it, so we're going to multiply it by itself. And because all the bases are the same, you can simply add all the exponents. So there's 6 of them, so it's going to be x to the 6th power. Okay, and that's our answer. Now, an easy method to actually solve these problems is to use the power to power rule. Okay, power to power rule. And that is given a raised to the mth power raised to the nth power. All you have to do is keep the base and multiply the exponents. Okay, once again, keep the a or the base and multiply the exponents. So let's try an example. Here we have t raised to the 4th power raised to the 5th power. So that's going to be t, keep the base, and raised to the 4th power of 4 times 5, which is 20. Okay, that's going to be your answer. All right, in this one, we have negative a raised to the power of 3, and then all of that raised to the power of 5. Well, one thing to keep in mind is, first of all, the 3 is getting applied to the negative and the a, and it's getting raised to an odd power. So whenever you raise negative to an odd power, you're always going to get back a negative. So what's going to happen is you're still going to end up with negative a raised to the power of 3, and then you're going to raise that to the power of 5. And notice again, the 5 is being applied to the negative and the 3. And because 5 is an odd number, you're going to get back a negative. Okay? So negative raised to an odd power, you get a negative, and then you're going to keep the base and then multiply the exponent. So 3 times 5 is 15. So your answer is going to be negative a raised to the power of 15. Okay. Let's try example 4. So the 2 is getting applied to the 3 and the x. Okay, 3 squared is 9, and then we just have the x squared. So your answer is 9x squared. Okay, the other rule you need to be aware of is the power of products rule for exponents. And this says given an expression a times b, okay, a times b and inside of parentheses, raised to the power of m, what you're going to get back is a raised to the mth power times b raised to the mth power, okay? In other words, you're going to apply the exponent to each item that's being multiplied, and then you're going to take the product of those things, okay? So knowing that, let's try example 5. So remember, the 5 is getting applied to the negative, it's getting applied to the 2, and it's getting applied to k. So this is going to be a negative, right? 5 is an odd number. 2 raised to the 5th power. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. What is that? 4 times 4 times 2. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 2 is 32. So we're going to end up with negative 32 k raised to the 5th power. Okay. All right. Example number 6. It says evaluate for x equals 5. So all we're going to do is plug in, x equals 2. So what you're going to do is plug in 2 for x in each of these. So 5x to the 3rd power. Make sure you surround whatever you're plugging in with parentheses. Okay, that's something you should always remember to do. All right. So this is going to be 5 Okay, make sure you also remember your order of operations, PEMDAS. So you have to work on this first. 2 raised to the power of 3, okay? 2 raised to the power of 3 is 8. So 5 times 8 is going to give you 40. And that's our answer. Okay, next one. So we have an expression inside of parentheses. They're being multiplied. So you're going to apply the 3 to the 5 and the x. And then you're going to take the product of those things. So 5 to the third power is 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. Okay. So you're going to end up with 125 times x to the third. And you can just put it together since they're being multiplied. So it's going to be 125 x to the third power. All right. C. So this is the exact same thing as B. Okay? Because we have 5 raised to the power of 3 times x raised to the power of 3. So 5 raised to the power of 3, we just went over this, is 125. So it's going to be 125 x raised to the third power. Okay? So we get the same answer. All right. Let's try our last example. Example 7, and we have inside of the parentheses, we have negative 4x squared times y raised to the 5th power, and then all of that is raised to the power of 3. So we're going to multiply 3. Sorry, we're going to apply the 3 to each element. So we're going to apply it to the negative, the 4, x squared, and x to the 5th. And then we're going to take the product of all those things, okay? So negative raised to an odd power is going to give you a negative. 4 raised to the power of 3, what is that? 4 times 4 times 4 equals 16 times 4. 16 times 4 is 64. Okay. So negative 64. And then x, we're going to keep the base and multiply the exponent. So 2 times 3 is 6. Keep the base, which is y, and multiply the exponents. 5 times 3 equals 15. And so we end up with this thing right here. Negative 64 times x to the 6th power, y to the 15th power.